The Klingon Civil War was a conflict fought early in 2368 over the right to choose the next Chancellor of the Klingon High Council and de facto leader of the Klingon Empire. The war was fought between loyal forces to Gowron and the legal appointed candidate, and the supporters of the House of Duras, led by Lorsa and Beator. The war was a decisive victory for Gowron, but it was achieved only through indirect assistance from the United Federation of Planets in exposing a covert Romulan assistance to the forces of the Duras family. Prelude to war. The conflict has roots in the reigns of Kimpek, the longest-lived Chancellor of the Empire. Although Kimpek ruled with an iron fist and managed to keep peace with the Empire, his influence began to wane as he grew older, and the two opposing factors began to develop. The first faction, led by Gowron, favored continued alliance with the Federation, while the second faction, led by Duras, sought to establish a more independent and aggressive policy for the Empire. Duras had support from a large majority of the High Council, while Gowron's support came largely from political outsiders and military personnel. Tensions came to a head in early 2367 with the sudden revelation that Kimpek was dying. He had been slowly poisoned by Veridium-6 that had been introduced into his blood wine. Because the killer had not shown his face to the victim, Klingon tradition considered the act to be without honor. Recognizing the corruption that had taken hold in the Empire, Kimpek had decided that he could not trust any Klingon with the task of choosing the next leader of the Empire. Therefore, he took the unheard-of action of selecting Jean-Luc Picard, a human Starfleet officer, as the arbiter of succession. Picard initially refused Kimpek's request, but Kimpek argued that a Klingon civil war would inevitably involve neighboring powers, the Tholian Assembly, the Ferengi Alliance, and ultimately the Romulan Star Empire and the Federation itself. Kimpek pointed out that whoever had dishonorably killed him, either Gowron or Duras, could not be allowed to rule the Empire. Concerned by the prospect of a massive interstellar war, Picard agreed to arbitrate the dispute. The process of selecting a new leader for the Empire was almost immediately disrupted by a bomb exploding in the middle of the Scifi ceremony, confirming Kimpek's death. One retainer each from Gowron and Duras' delegations was killed in the blast. Picard, wary of Kimpek's warnings concerning the dishonorable actions of either Duras or Gowron, chose to proceed carefully. He reviewed the ancient ritual of Jachin, in which each contender tried to prove his worthiness to lead the council, which delayed the final decision long enough to allow the Enterprise crew to investigate the bombing. What the Enterprise officers found was disturbing. The bomb had used a molecular decay detonator, a type of device only used by the Romulans. Given the past history between the House of Duras and the Romulans, Duras had previously been involved in a cover-up of his father, Jarrah's culpability in the Kittimer massacres some 20 years before, which was officially blamed on Worf's father, Moog, for which Worf chose to accept dishonor to keep the Empire from splitting up. Duras' house had grown politically powerful, and there were now evidence pointing towards one of the contenders. The proceedings were abruptly ended by a fight between Duras and Worf. Duras had killed Kether, the Federation ambassador to the Klingon Empire, for investigating into the matters of the Kittimer massacre and uncovering Duras' father's culpability. Worf, as Kahirla's mate, claimed the right of vengeance against Duras and killed Duras in an honorable combat. Although Worf was officially persona non grata within the Empire, the Council considered the matter closed. With Duras killed and his faction discredited, the way was clear for Gowron to assume leadership of the Council. Although Duras died in disgrace, his family did not inherit that disgrace. The corruption of Duras had spread to much of the rest of the High Council, who stood ready to support the House of Duras despite the traditional dishonor of its now dead leader. Lursa and Beator, the sisters of Duras, assumed leadership of the House and began gathering support to overpower Gowron. They also secured the alliance of 3 potential fleet commanders, swelling their ranks for a possible military challenge to Gowron's leadership. Gowron requested that Picard, as the arbiter of succession, ensure his installation as Chancellor. Picard would not step outside the boundaries of Klingon law, and refused Gowron's request for assistance. He would only assure that Gowron would respond to any challenge according to Klingon law. The sisters' power play, when it came, took an unexpected form. They introduced to the Council Toril, a young, previously unknown, illegitimate son of and heir to Duras. Toril challenged Gowron for leadership of the Council, and the Council, controlled almost entirely by supporters of the Duras family, backed his challenge. Ultimately, Picard chose to reject Toril's claim, arguing that Toril had claimed no honor for himself, having fought no battles for the Empire. Incensed, Lursa and Beator protested Picard's dictating of the Klingon affairs and led most of the High Council in walking out of the Great Hall. Gowron was left with a few allies and practically no support. The war finally broke out with a brazen attack against Gowron's flagship, the IKS Boras. Not expecting an attack so quickly, Gowron was taken by surprise and his ship was nearly destroyed before the attackers were driven off by Captain Kurn and the IKS Hekta. Kurn, an outspoken opponent of both Gowron and Duras, had been persuaded to support Gowron by his elder brother Worf. Kurn brought both the support of 3 full fleet squadrons with him, which gave Gowron a fighting chance to resist his enemies. Embroiled by his support, Gowron chose to go through with his installation as Chancellor of the Klingon Empire. Worf, having accepted dishonor to keep the Empire from splitting apart, now unfortunately saw his sacrifice wasted as the Empire sundered. Faced with a choice to return to duty on board the Enterprise or fight alongside his brother in support of Gowron, he chose to reassign his commission to fight under Kurn aboard the Hekta. As the official leader of the Empire, Gowron requested that the Federation send support in fighting Duras' family forces under the terms of the Treaty of the Alliance. Jean-Luc Picard, acting as a representative of the Federation, refused to commit Federation resources, calling the conflict by definition an internal Klingon matter. Although the majority of the Klingon fleet had not yet chosen sides in the conflict, Gowron was seriously outnumbered by Duras' forces, who controlled at least 7 squadrons and had amassed a large fleet near Beta Thoron. Over the next 2 weeks, Gowron's forces suffered 3 major defeats, most notably at the Battle of Mempa. Although the Battle of Mempa was a major defeat for Gowron, it was also a notable battle because it could have resulted in a complete rout. General Martok became a revered figure in the Klingon military for his heroic leadership on that day. Additionally, Captain Kurn used a brilliant and unorthodox maneuver of ordering the Hekta to use a solar flare to destroy 2 pursuing warships. In the Federation, many eyes were closely watching the reports coming in from the battlefields. Although the Prime Directive dictated that the Federation remain neutral in the war, Captain Picard correctly pointed out that if other powers such as Romulans were involved in the conflict, then it would very much be a Federation concern. Picard argued that an unbroken string of Duras victories indicated that they were receiving outside support. Indeed, Picard pointed out that the Romulans had been trying to destabilize the Klingon Federation alliance for the past 20 years, and it was almost unthinkable that they would remain uninvolved at such a critical crossroads in the affairs of the Empire. In a proposal to Fleet Admiral Shanti, Picard suggested that the Starfleet blockade the Klingon-Romulan border and prevent any ships from sending any further, still hypothetical support to the Duras family. Using a new technique called a tachyon detection grid, even cloaked ships would be detectable to Starfleet sensors. Shanti and the Federation Council authorized Picard's plan and the Enterprise D, led by a 23 fleet ship, into Klingon territory to deploy the tachyon net. The action drew immediate protest from the Romulan side of the border as Commander Sela demanded that the Federation fleet withdraw or be considered hostile and a potential invasion force. In order to provoke the Romulans into attempting to run the blockade, Picard suggested that Gowron launch a full-scale assault on Duras's forces in the hopes of forcing Duras to call for help from their secret allies. The Romulans took the bait, and despite an attempt to evade detection that was defeated thanks to the initiative of Lieutenant Commander Data in command of the USS Sutherland, the Romulan ships were exposed. With their connection to the Duras family exposed, Sela ordered the ships retreat back to Romulan territory rather than risk a fight with both the Klingons and the Federation. Klingon support fell away from the Duras family as knowledge of their collaboration with the Romulans spread, and Gowron led an offensive to complete victory. In the final days of the war, Lursa and Beator fled their base on Kronos as it was stormed by Gowron's troops, abandoning Toril to fend for himself. He ended up being convicted of treason by the High Council. Gowron restored Worf's honor in gratitude and handed the fate of Toril over to him. Worf opted to spare Toril's life as he had been little more than a pawn of his aunt's, a decision he'd later regret. The aftermath. Following his victory, Gowron proceeded to establish strict control over the Empire. He appointed an entirely new High Council membership, including Kurn and several other key allies. Although Gowron's position was threatened by the appearance of a clone of Kahless the Unforgettable in 2369, Gowron was generally treated as the uncontested leader of the Empire until 2375.